The breaking point. The cold bit through Zoe Phillips's thin jacket as she huddled against the brick wall of Westlake Plaza. November in Seattle meant rain. Constant, unforgiving rain that seeped into her bones and made the pages of her sketchbook curl. At 22, she'd never imagined this would be her life. Counting quarters for a cup of coffee that would buy her hours in a warm cafe, wearing the same jeans for a week straight, sleeping with her backpack strapped to her chest. 6 months ago, she'd had an apartment, a job at a small graphic design firm, and plans to finish her degree. Then came her mother's cancer diagnosis, the medical bills, the choice between rent and treatment. After her mother passed, the grief crushed her ability to function. She missed deadlines, lost her job, and eventually, her apartment. Her father had disappeared years ago, and her only aunt lived across the country, barely acknowledging Zoe's existence. "Miss, you can't sit here all day," the security guard said, not unkindly but firmly. Zoe nodded, gathering her worn sketchbook and pencils. She'd become an expert at identifying which businesses would tolerate her presence and for how long. "Sorry," she murmured, tucking a strand of copper hair behind her ear. "Just waiting out the rain." The guard's face softened slightly. "Try the library. They're open late today." Zoe offered a grateful smile and shouldered her backpack, containing everything she still owned in the world. Her portfolio, a change of clothes, her mother's silver locket, and a rapidly dwindling supply of toiletries. She'd pawned her laptop weeks ago. The rain had momentarily subsided to a misty drizzle as she walked the 6 blocks to the Central Library. Seattle's homeless shelters were overcrowded, especially as winter approached. She'd learned to navigate this precarious existence, finding places to wash up, keeping herself presentable enough that she didn't immediately read as homeless. Inside the library's soaring glass structure, Zoe claimed a quiet corner desk, spreading out her sketchbook. Drawing was her escape, the one thing that still brought her joy. Today, she was working on a design for a mobile app interface, practice to keep her skills sharp. She'd managed to land a few freelance jobs using the library computers, but nowhere near enough to afford housing. On the other side of the library, Harrison Reed sat alone, absorbed in a book about architectural innovation. At 41, he'd built Horizon Technologies into a multi-billion-dollar company, revolutionizing sustainable energy storage systems. Business publications called him brilliant, reclusive, enigmatic. In reality, he was simply tired, exhausted by the performance of being Harrison Reed tech visionary. The library was one of the few public spaces where he could be anonymous, just another patron among many. Harrison watched the young woman with the sketchbook from the corner of his eye. Something about her concentration, the way she seemed to disappear into her work, caught his attention. Despite her worn clothing and the large backpack she kept close, she worked with precision, completely absorbed in whatever she was creating. When the closing announcement came over the speakers, Zoe's shoulders slumped visibly. The night shelter she sometimes used required check-in by 8 p.m. and she'd lost track of time. Now she'd be spending another night searching for a safe doorway or underpass. As she packed up her materials, her sketchbook slipped, pages fanning, across the floor. Harrison, walking past, stopped to help gather them. "These are remarkable," he said, pausing to look at a detailed interface design. "You're a designer?" Zoe quickly took the pages from his hands. "Trying to be," she answered, her voice a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Harrison noticed her worn sneakers, the careful way she protected her sketches despite their obvious value. "I'm interested in design myself," he said, which wasn't entirely untrue. "There's a cafe across the street still open. Would you mind showing me more of your work? I'll buy the coffee." Zoe hesitated. Years of street smarts making her wary of strangers offering anything. But something in the man's eyes seemed genuinely interested, not predatory, and the prospect of a warm place to sit for another hour was too tempting to refuse. "One, coffee," she agreed cautiously, "and just to talk design." Neither Zoe nor Harrison could have known that this moment, this simple exchange in a closing library, would alter both their lives irrevocably. The universe, which had seemed so cruel to Zoe for so long, had perhaps finally decided to show mercy. Hidden depths. The cafe buzzed with late evening patrons, but Harrison secured a quiet corner table away from the windows. Zoe sat perched on the edge of her chair, as if ready to flee at any moment. Her backpack remained firmly against her legs. One strap looped around her ankle, a habit developed from necessity. "I'm Harrison, by the way," he said, extending his hand across the table. "Zoe." She shook his hand briefly, surprised by the calluses she felt. Not what she expected from someone whose tailored wool coat probably cost more than she'd made in a month at her old job. When the server approached, Harrison ordered a black coffee while Zoe hesitated, eyeing the menu prices. "Get whatever you want," Harrison said, noticing her discomfort. Zoe ordered a mocha and a sandwich, attempting to appear casual while her stomach clenched with hunger. She hadn't eaten since the free breakfast at a downtown church that morning. "So, you're interested in UI design?" Harrison asked, gesturing to her sketchbook. Zoe relaxed slightly on familiar ground now. "I was studying digital media before." She paused. "Before I had to leave school. I still freelance when I can." Harrison listened as she explained her design philosophy, impressed by her clarity of thought. When her food arrived, she tried to eat slowly, maintaining dignity despite her hunger. "What about you?" she asked between careful bites. "What do you do?" Harrison gave the answer he'd prepared for such occasions. "I work in tech. Energy solutions. Like solar?" "My mom was always interested in sustainability," Zoe said, a shadow crossing her face at the mention of her mother. Harrison nodded, surprised by her immediate understanding. Most people heard tech and assumed social media or gaming. "Something like that. We're working on making energy storage more efficient." As they talked, Harrison found himself sharing more than usual. There was something disarming about Zoe's direct gaze, the way she listened without the calculation he'd grown accustomed to in his usual circles. "I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil," Zoe confided, showing him more pages from her sketchbook. "My mom was an art teacher. She always said creativity was how humans make sense of chaos." Harrison studied a particularly elegant design. "She sounds wise." She was. Zoe's voice softened. "Cancer took her 6 months ago." The simple statement hung between them, raw and honest. Harrison recognized the grief in her eyes. He'd seen it in his own mirror after his brother's death years ago. "I lost my brother to an aneurysm," he found himself saying. "It was sudden, no warning." Zoe nodded, understanding passing between them. "Those are the worst kinds of goodbyes, the ones you never get to say." Outside, rain began falling again, drumming against the windows. The cafe would close soon, and Harrison noticed Zoe glancing anxiously at the door, then back to the weather. "Do you have far to go?" he asked carefully, suspecting the answer. Zoe's chin lifted slightly. "I'll be fine. I know this area well." Harrison considered his options. He rarely involved himself in others' lives, maintaining careful boundaries between himself and the world. But something about Zoe's quiet dignity moved him. "I have a proposition," he said finally. "Completely professional. Horizon, my company, needs freelance design work. We're developing a new app for energy consumption tracking. Your style would fit the project." Zoe's expression turned skeptical. "Your company just happens to need exactly what I do?" Harrison smiled, appreciating her wariness. "Actually, yes. And I'd rather hire an independent designer than deal with an agency. The catch is that we need someone who can work on site sometimes, at least initially. I don't exactly have a permanent address right now," Zoe admitted, the words clearly difficult for her. "We have a corporate apartment for consultants," Harrison continued, choosing his words carefully. "It's sitting empty this month. You could use it while working on the project. Professional arrangement, proper contract, fair payment." Zoe's eyes narrowed. "Why would you offer that to someone you just met?" "Because I saw your work before I knew anything else about you," Harrison replied honestly. "Talent deserves opportunity regardless of circumstances." Zoe stared at her empty plate, conflicted. The prospect of shelter was almost painfully tempting, but pride and caution held her back. I don't accept charity. It's not charity if you earn it, Harrison countered. This is business. You have skills we need. As the cafe began closing, Harrison handed her his business card, simple with just his name and number. Think about it. Call me tomorrow if you're interested. He paid the bill and stood to leave. Zoe examined the card, still uncertain. And if I'm not interested? Harrison shrugged. Then I wish you well and hope someone else recognizes your talent soon. Outside, he hailed a rideshare, then paused before getting in. The offer is genuine, Zoe. No strings attached. As the car pulled away, Zoe stood beneath the cafe awning, the business card clutched in her hand. Rain poured around her, and the prospect of another night searching for shelter loomed. She'd learned the hard way that kindness often came with hidden costs. But something about Harrison seemed different. In his eyes she'd seen not pity but recognition, as if he'd glimpsed something in her that others missed, something valuable. Tucking the card securely into her sketchbook, Zoe stepped into the rain. Whatever decision she made would need to wait until morning. Tonight she still needed to find somewhere to stay dry. Yet for the first time in months, possibility flickered within her. A tiny flame she dared not trust but couldn't entirely dismiss. Neither of them recognized it yet, but their chance meeting had cracked open doors long sealed shut in both their lives. Behind those doors waited not just professional opportunity, but the rarest of human connections. One built on mutual understanding rather than need or obligation. The rain continued to fall, washing Seattle's streets clean, while fate quietly continued weaving its intricate pattern. The revelation: the corporate apartment exceeded all of Zoe's expectations. Located on the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, it featured floor-to-ceiling windows with breathtaking views of Elliott Bay. The furnishings were minimal but elegant, clearly expensive without being ostentatious. After 3 weeks of working as a design consultant for Harrison's company, Zoe still felt like an imposter every time she swiped her keycard. She'd called Harrison the morning after their cafe meeting, pride warring with pragmatism. The contract he'd offered was legitimate: 30 days of design work for Horizon Technologies' new consumer application, with compensation that made her eyes widen. The corporate apartment was listed as a standard benefit for out-of-town consultants. Now, Zoe sat cross-legged on the living room floor, digital tablet in hand, finalizing her designs for tomorrow's presentation. She'd traded her worn clothes for new ones, professional but still distinctly her style, purchased with her first advance payment. Her copper hair was freshly trimmed, her confidence growing with each passing day. Working with Harrison had been surprisingly easy. He had a clear vision but valued her input, and their collaboration flowed naturally. He'd introduced her simply as our design consultant, and while she occasionally caught curious glances from employees, no one questioned her presence. Harrison had remained professional but kind, often bringing lunch to their meetings and asking thoughtful questions about her design choices. He never mentioned her circumstances, treating her exactly as he would any other contractor. Zoe appreciated this more than he could know. A knock at the door startled her from her concentration. She wasn't expecting anyone. Setting aside her tablet, she approached cautiously and checked the peephole. Harrison stood in the hallway holding what appeared to be takeout bags. "Sorry for the surprise visit," he said when she opened the door. "I thought you might be working late and could use dinner. The presentation tomorrow is important." "Thanks," Zoe said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "I was just finishing up, actually." She invited him in, suddenly self-conscious about the apartment. She kept it meticulously clean, afraid that any sign of disorder might jeopardize her temporary haven. Harrison set the food on the kitchen counter. "I brought Thai from that place you mentioned liking." "You remembered that?" Zoe asked, surprised. "I pay attention," he replied simply, then gestured to her tablet. "How are the final designs coming?" As they ate, they reviewed her work, falling into their usual rhythm of creative discussion. Zoe found herself relaxing, laughing at Harrison's dry humor and building on his suggestions. "You know," Harrison said during a lull in conversation, "the board was impressed with the preliminary designs. There's talk of extending your contract." Hope fluttered in Zoe's chest, but she tempered it with caution. "That would be great. I've enjoyed working here." Harrison seemed about to say something more when his phone buzzed. Checking it, he frowned slightly. "I need to take this. Excuse me." He stepped away, speaking quietly into the phone. Zoe began clearing their dinner, trying not to eavesdrop, but phrases drifted toward her. "Tell the investors I'll handle it personally. The Reed Foundation commitment stands. Schedule the meeting at my estate." Reed. The Reed Foundation. Harrison Reed. Reality crashed over Zoe like an icy wave. She grabbed her tablet and quickly searched Harrison Reed Horizon Technologies. Thousands of results appeared instantly. Photos of Harrison at technology conferences, articles about his innovations in sustainable energy, profiles highlighting his status as one of the wealthiest technologists in the country. Forbes estimated his net worth at $18.7 billion. The man she'd been working with for weeks, the man who'd found her in a library and bought her coffee, was Harrison Reed, founder and CEO of Horizon Technologies. Not just some mid-level executive, as she'd assumed, but the billionaire visionary whose name graced the building. When Harrison ended his call and turned back to her, he found Zoe standing rigidly, her tablet displaying his Forbes profile. "You're him," she said flatly. "You're Harrison Reed." Harrison sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Would it have made a difference?" he countered. "Would you have taken the job if you'd known?" Zoe's thoughts raced chaotically. This whole thing, was it just some kind of charity project? Poor homeless girl gets rescued by Billionaire? "Zoe, did you laugh about it later? About how I had no idea who you were?" Harrison's expression hardened slightly. "I've never laughed at you. Not once." "Then why the deception?" "It wasn't deception," Harrison said firmly. "I am Harrison Reed. I do work at Horizon. Everything else was just context." "Context matters," Zoe exclaimed. "You let me believe you were just some regular tech employee. Meanwhile, you're—" She gestured at the tablet. "This." Harrison stepped closer, his voice low and intense. "Do you know what happens when people meet Harrison Reed, the billionaire? They either want something, fear something, or pretend to be something they're not. For once I wanted to work with someone who saw me, not my bank account." The sincerity in his voice gave Zoe pause. She remembered their conversations, how he'd listened to her ideas, valued her perspective. Had any of that been genuine? "The designs," she said quietly. "Did you actually need them, or was this all an elaborate setup to help the homeless girl?" "Look at me, Zoe." Harrison's eyes met hers steadily. "Your designs are brilliant. The work you've done is transforming our product. That's real. The opportunity was real. Yes, I could have found another designer, but not one with your vision." Zoe sank onto a bar stool, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to think." "Think about the work we've done together," Harrison said. "Judge me by that, not by some profile in Forbes." He gathered his jacket, sensing she needed space. "The presentation is still on for tomorrow if you want it. If not, I understand. Either way, this apartment is yours for the full contract period." At the door, he turned back. "For what it's worth, I've never felt more seen than when working with you. You've never treated me like I'm special or different. Do you know how rare that is?" After he left, Zoe stood at the windows, watching the lights of Seattle shimmer on the water. She felt betrayed, yet underneath the anger lay confusion. Harrison had given her opportunity, not handouts. He'd respected her work, valued her talent. But he'd also withheld a truth that changed everything. Or did it? What exactly was different now? The man was the same. Only her perception had shifted. Zoe glanced at her designs, the product of weeks of passionate work. Tomorrow's presentation could open doors to a real future. Could she walk away from that because her pride was wounded? As night deepened over the city, Zoe faced a choice that would define more than just her career. It would reveal what she truly valued, and whether she could separate the person from the perception, just as she'd hoped others would do for her when she was at her lowest. Shadows of the past. The Horizon Technologies boardroom fell silent as Zoe finished her presentation. For 40 minutes, she had commanded the attention of 12 executives, confidently explaining her design philosophy and demonstrating the user experience she'd created. Despite the turmoil of the previous night, professionalism had won out. She'd arrived exactly on time, dressed in her new charcoal blazer, tablet in hand. Harrison sat at the far end of the table, his face carefully neutral throughout her presentation. They hadn't spoken before the meeting, exchanging only a brief nod as she set up her materials. "Questions?" Zoe asked, standing tall despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. The chief marketing officer leaned forward. "The emotional response tracking feature. That's innovative. How did you develop that concept?" "My mother's illness taught me that people need to feel understood even by technology," Zoe answered, surprised by her own candor. "Users don't just want to track energy usage, they want to feel good about their impact." More questions followed, then approving nods and murmurs. The board voted unanimously to implement her designs and extend her contract for 6 months. As the executives filed out, several stopped to compliment her work. Harrison remained seated, watching the interactions with an unreadable expression. When they were finally alone, he spoke. "That was exceptional, Zoe." She gathered her materials, emotions still conflicted. "Thank you for not canceling the presentation." "I would never do that," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "Have you decided about the contract extension?" "I need time to think," Zoe replied. The offer was generous. Too generous, perhaps. It included continued use of the corporate apartment, a substantial salary increase, and creative control over user experience design for Horizon's consumer products. Harrison nodded. "Of course. Take the weekend." As Zoe turned to leave, he added, "There's a benefit gala at the Art Museum tomorrow evening. The Reed Foundation is a sponsor. Would you consider attending as my guest?" "Strictly professional," he clarified quickly. "Many of our industry partners will be there. Good networking opportunity." Zoe hesitated. "I don't have anything to wear to something like that." "The invitation includes a styling budget," Harrison said. "Standard practice for corporate representatives. No different than providing business cards." Though skeptical, Zoe agreed. Perhaps seeing Harrison in his public role would help her understand the man behind the billions. The following evening, a car delivered Zoe to the Seattle Art Museum. The emerald gown she'd selected with the stylist's help made her feel both elegant and conspicuous. As she entered the grand hall, filled with Seattle's elite informal attire, her confidence wavered. Harrison appeared beside her, handsome in a classic tuxedo. "You look lovely," he said, offering his arm. "Ready to meet some potential clients?" For the next hour, he guided her through the crowd, introducing her as the visionary designer behind Horizon's new consumer platform. To her surprise, he emphasized her talent repeatedly, ensuring everyone knew she was there on professional merit. During a momentary lull, Harrison led her to a quiet corner. "You're a natural at this," he observed. "Everyone's impressed." "It's strange," Zoe admitted. "Yesterday I was worried about having a roof over my head. Tonight I'm discussing design theory with tech executives while drinking champagne." "Life changes quickly sometimes," Harrison replied. He seemed about to say more when a distinguished older couple approached. "Harrison, my boy." The man embraced him warmly. "Magnificent event as always." "Judge Wilson, Mrs. Wilson," Harrison greeted them. "This is Zoe Phillips, our brilliant new design director." As they exchanged pleasantries, Zoe noticed the genuine affection between Harrison and the judge. After they moved on, Harrison explained, "Thomas Wilson was my guardian after my parents died. Car accident when I was 14. "I didn't know. You were an orphan," Zoe said softly. "My brother Devin and I went to live with the Wilsons." Thomas was my father's law partner. They were kind, but Harrison's gaze grew distant. Devon was the only real family I had left. When I lost him too, it was like being orphaned twice. Understanding dawned on Zoe. That's why you approached me that night, isn't it? You recognized something familiar. Before Harrison could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A tall woman in a striking red dress was making her way directly toward them, camera flashes following her progress. "Vivian," Harrison murmured, his posture stiffening almost imperceptibly. The woman arrived with a dazzling smile, air-kissing Harrison's cheek. "Darling, you've been avoiding me. My feelings are quite hurt." "Vivian Blake, meet Zoe Phillips," Harrison said, his tone professional once more. "Zoe is leading design for our new platform. Vivian is CEO of Blake Industries." "Charmed," Vivian said, assessing Zoe with calculating eyes. "Harrison and I go way back. We were engaged once upon a time." "Ancient history," Harrison interjected smoothly. "Vivian's company is developing complementary technology to ours." "More than complementary," Vivian purred. "We should discuss the merger proposal again, Harrison. Our boards are practically begging for it." Discomfort prickled along Zoe's spine. She excused herself, claiming she needed some air, and slipped away to a balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline. The night air cleared her head as she tried to reconcile the different versions of Harrison she'd encountered. The kind stranger, from the library, the focused collaborator, the billionaire philanthropist, and now the polished society figure with a glamorous ex-fiancé. She's quite the negotiator, isn't she? Zoe turned to find Harrison joining her on the balcony, 2 glasses of water in hand. He offered one to her. "You were engaged to her?" Zoe asked. Harrison leaned against the railing. 6 years ago. It was a business arrangement more than a relationship. Our companies were struggling. This was before the energy storage breakthrough. The engagement lasted 3 months. What happened? I realized I couldn't spend my life with someone who saw me as an asset to be managed. Harrison's voice was matter of fact. After Devon died, I promised myself I'd never again settle for connections that weren't real. "Is that why you didn't tell me who you were?" Zoe asked quietly. "You wanted something real?" Harrison turned to face her fully. "When I saw you in that library, I just saw a talented person who needed a break. Then, as we worked together, I realized how refreshing it was to be just Harrison. Not a billionaire, not a CEO, just someone collaborating with a gifted designer." "But you are a billionaire," Zoe pointed out. "That's part of who you are. It's what I have, not who I am," Harrison countered. "You of all people should understand that difference. When you lost everything, did it change who you are at your core?" The question struck Zoe deeply. Her months of homelessness had stripped away everything external, leaving only her essential self, her creativity, her determination, her values. "No," she admitted. "It didn't change who I am." "That night in the library," Harrison said softly, "I saw someone who had nothing, yet was still creating beauty. It reminded me that worth isn't measured in dollars." Inside, the orchestra began playing a waltz. The sounds drifted out to the balcony, a gentle backdrop to their conversation. "Devon used to say that everyone's hiding something," Harrison continued. "The rich hide their emptiness, the poor hide their potential, and everyone hides their fear of being truly seen." Zoe considered his words. "What are you hiding, Harrison?" "Until recently, my loneliness." His admission was startlingly honest. "What about you?" "My fear," Zoe answered after a moment. "Fear that I'll end up back where I started." Harrison nodded, understanding passing between them. "We should go back inside. People will talk." As they turned to rejoin the gala, Zoe realized something had shifted between them. Beyond the professional relationship, beyond the differences in their circumstances, a tentative trust was forming, built not on what either of them possessed, but on what they had both lost and what they might perhaps find together. New Horizons spring arrived in Seattle with uncharacteristic sunshine, bathing the city in golden light. 6 months had passed since Zoe's presentation to the Horizon board. Now, she stood in her own office, a corner space with windows overlooking the Sound, reviewing final designs for the consumer app's launch. Life had transformed with dizzying speed. Her contract extension had evolved into a permanent position as design director. She'd moved from the corporate apartment to a modest but charming condo she'd purchased herself, her first real home since losing her mother. Most importantly, she'd reconnected with her passion, leading a team of designers who respected her vision. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. Meeting running late. Still on for dinner? Zoe smiled as she replied, yes. 7 p.m. at Canlis there. Relationship had evolved gradually, cautiously. For months after the gala, they maintained a strictly professional dynamic, though they often found themselves working late, sharing ideas and stories long after others had gone home. Harrison never pushed for more, respecting the complexity of their situation. It was Zoe who finally acknowledged the connection between them, inviting Harrison to the opening of an exhibition featuring her mother's artwork, pieces she'd kept in storage during her homeless period, unable to bear selling them despite her desperation. Ready for tomorrow's launch? Olivia, Zoe's assistant, appeared in the doorway. As ready as we'll ever be, Zoe replied, closing her tablet. The Horizon Home Energy app represented months of intensive work, her design philosophy made tangible. The press is already calling it revolutionary, Olivia noted, making energy conservation emotional rather than just statistical. People need to feel connected to their impact, Zoe said, echoing what had become her design mantra. Numbers alone don't change behavior. After Olivia left, Zoe opened her desk drawer and removed a worn sketchbook, the same one she'd been using that night in the library. Its pages contained the earliest concepts for what had become the Horizon app, along with reflections from her darkest days. A knock interrupted her reminiscence. Gloria Chen, Horizon's head of human resources, entered with a folder. The foundation paperwork you requested, Gloria said, placing it on Zoe's desk. Harrison approved everything. You'll have full autonomy over implementation. Thank you, Zoe said, her heart quickening as she examined the documents. The Horizon Pathways Initiative was her brainchild, a program to identify talented individuals, experiencing homelessness and provide them with technical training, housing, and employment opportunities. Harrison had embraced the concept immediately, allocating substantial funding from both corporate and foundation sources. The board was impressed with the proposal, Gloria added, especially the mentorship component. Zoe nodded, pride warming her chest. The program would pair participants with Horizon employees who could provide professional guidance and personal support, something she wished she'd had during her own struggle. After Gloria departed, Zoe prepared to leave for the day. Tomorrow's launch would be hectic and she wanted to be well rested. As she gathered her things, her phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Zoe Phillips speaking. Ms. Phillips, this is Vanessa Moore from Seattle Architectural Digest. We're doing a feature on innovative workspaces and would love to include your story. My story? Zoe echoed, confused. Yes, from homelessness to heading design at Horizon. It's inspiring. Mr. Reed mentioned it during his tech-forward interview last week. Zoe froze, shock giving way to disbelief. Harrison had publicly discussed her past without consulting her. I'll need to call you back, she managed, ending the call abruptly. Emotions roiled as she drove to her condo. How could Harrison have revealed something so personal? Her team respected her for her talent, not her compelling backstory. Would they now see her differently? She'd worked so hard to build her identity as a design professional, not as a charity. Case by evening, her anger had crystallized into hurt. At Canlis, she arrived early, requesting a private table overlooking Lake Union. The restaurant's elegant ambiance felt at odds with her turbulent thoughts. Harrison arrived precisely at 7, handsome in a charcoal suit. His smile faded when he saw her expression. What's wrong? He asked, sliding into his seat. I received an interesting call today, Zoe said, keeping her voice level. Apparently my journey from park benches to Horizon is going to be featured in Architectural Digest. Harrison's face fell. Zoe, you had no right, she interrupted, emotion breaking through. That was my story to tell or keep private. My choice. I'm sorry, Harrison said, genuine remorse in his eyes. The interview was about innovation ecosystems. The reporter asked about our hiring practices, and I mentioned our commitment to looking beyond traditional backgrounds. I referenced your experience as an example of untapped talent. You should have asked me first. You're right, Harrison acknowledged. I didn't think about how it would affect you. It was thoughtless. His immediate accountability deflated some of Zoe's anger. I've worked so hard to be seen for my abilities, not my circumstances. And you are, Harrison said firmly. Everyone at Horizon respects your talent. I never meant to undermine that. Zoe sighed, conflict still evident in her expression. Do you know what frightened me most about being homeless? Not the danger or the hunger, it was the invisibility. People looked through me, not at me. When they did see me, it was with pity or disgust, never as an equal. Harrison reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I have never seen you as anything but my equal, Zoe, from that first night in the library. I believe you, she said finally. But this matters to me, Harrison. My story is mine to share. I understand. It won't happen again. He hesitated, then added, Would you prefer I contact the magazine and withdraw the comment? Zoe considered this, then slowly shook her head. No. Maybe. Maybe it could help someone else in that situation. The server arrived with wine, and they paused their conversation. After he departed, Harrison raised his glass. To tomorrow's launch, he offered. To your vision becoming reality. Zoe clinked her glass against his. To new beginnings. As they dined, the tension gradually dissipated. They discussed the app launch, the Pathways Initiative, and Harrison's upcoming meeting with international sustainability leaders. There's something I've been meaning to show you, Harrison said as they finished dessert. He removed a small flash drive from his pocket. This is for you. Curious, Zoe connected it to her phone. It contained a single video file. She pressed play and saw Harrison sitting in what appeared to be his home office. This is my tech-forward interview, his recorded self explained. The full version, unedited. I wanted you to see what I actually said. Zoe watched as the interviewer asked about Horizon's approach to talent acquisition. Traditional credentials only tell part of the story, Video Harrison replied. Some of our most innovative team members came to us through unconventional paths. Our design director was self-taught, worked freelance, experienced personal hardship, including homelessness, yet created the most intuitive user experience we've ever implemented. Talent exists everywhere. Our job is to recognize it and provide opportunity, not charity. The video continued, but Zoe had heard enough. She looked up to find Harrison watching her, vulnerability evident in his expression. That's how I see you, Zoe. Always have. She reached across the table, taking his hand for the first time in public. Thank you for showing me. Later, they walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. A comfortable silence settled between them, until Zoe spoke. Do you remember asking what I was hiding that night at the gala? Harrison nodded. I was hiding from possibility, she admitted, from hoping for something more than just survival. And now? Harrison asked softly. Zoe stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Now I'm ready to stop hiding. She stepped closer, her voice steady. I care about you, Harrison. Not the billionaire, not the CEO. Just you. I care about you too, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. More than I thought possible. When he kissed her, it felt like the culmination of a journey neither had planned but both had needed. A path from isolation to connection, from loss to renewal. 1 year later, Zoe stood before a group of 20 people gathered in Horizon's training center. The first cohort of the Pathways Initiative, individuals selected for their talent and potential, all of whom had experienced homelessness, looked back at her with expressions ranging from hopeful to skeptical. I won't pretend to know each of your stories, she began.
But I do know what it's like to have talent and dreams but nowhere to sleep, to have potential but no opportunity. She gestured around the state-of-the-art facility. This program isn't
about charity. It's about recognizing value where others don't bother to look. You're here because you have something to contribute. From the back of the room, Harrison watched with quiet pride. The program had already garnered national attention, with other companies beginning to implement similar initiatives. After the orientation, as participants toured the facility with program coordinators, Harrison joined Zoe. "Impressive speech," he said, slipping his arm around her waist. "I meant every word," she replied, leaning into him briefly before stepping away to greet a participant with questions. Harrison observed as Zoe engaged with the young woman, offering genuine encouragement. She wore her success naturally now, her confidence no longer fragile, but firmly rooted in accomplishment. Their relationship had blossomed over the past year, weathering public scrutiny and the inevitable challenges of their different backgrounds. They'd learned to balance professional boundaries with personal connection, building something neither had experienced before, a partnership of equals despite external inequalities. That evening, they sat on the deck of Harrison's lakeside home, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid orange and pink. Zoe's condo had sold the previous month, though she'd insisted on donating the proceeds to housing initiatives rather than simply moving in with Harrison. The app hit 5 million downloads today, Harrison mentioned, scrolling through his phone. "User retention is unprecedented. People respond to emotional connection," Zoe said. "Even with technology." Harrison set his phone aside, turning to face her. "I've been thinking about Devin recently. What he would make of all this." "What do you think he'd say?" Zoe asked, knowing how much Harrison's brother still meant to him. "He'd probably say it's about time I found someone who doesn't care about the money." Harrison smiled softly. He always worried I'd end up alone in some giant house, surrounded by technology instead of people. "Well, you're only half alone in this giant house," Zoe teased. "Progress." Harrison's expression grew serious. "I'd like to change that. The alone part, not the house. Though we could move if you prefer." Zoe's breath caught as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I'm not asking because of your design brilliance or what you've overcome, or even how beautiful you are," Harrison said, opening the box to reveal a simple but stunning emerald ring. "I'm asking because you see me, the real me, and somehow still love what you see." Tears welled in Zoe's eyes. "Are you proposing?" "Trying to," Harrison said, his usual confidence wavering. "Not very successfully, it seems." Zoe laughed, joy bubbling through her tears. "You're doing fine, keep going." Harrison took her hand. "Zoe Phillips, will you marry me? Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just me." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Just you is exactly who I want." As the ring slipped onto her finger, a perfect fit, Zoe marveled at life's unexpected trajectories. 2 years ago she'd been homeless, hopeless, sketching designs no one might ever see. Now she stood at the threshold of a future brighter than any she'd dared imagine. They had both been broken in different ways, Harrison by wealth and isolation, Zoe by poverty and struggle. Yet somehow those very brokennesses had created spaces where they fit together perfectly, healing each other in the process. The sunset faded to twilight, stars beginning to appear above the lake. Neither Zoe nor Harrison felt any rush to go inside. They had found their home in each other, a sanctuary no money could buy and no hardship could take away. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. Two souls who had learned the most valuable lesson. That true worth lies not in what we possess, but in who we become when we're truly seen.